No one's ever really gone. That is a line that has gone through a large amount of mockery in recent years, but it's not necessarily a bad thing in the context of tabletop wargames, or in the context of factions with very dedicated fan bases. While many like to approach Battletech as a pure story, wanting the setting to shed factions and leading houses like a body sheds skin cells, it's just not how wargames can functionally be made, given the enormous investment in time, emotion, and money that one person can have in such factions. If they are completely removed, the players from these groups will simply often move on, or they'll play only in the past, further limiting the exposure of new materials and inevitably not helping the brand. In this video, we are going to be talking about the recent CGL release of The Ghosts of Obeedah, and not just in the context of its story, which is an RPG adventure and has canonical, confirmed components to it, that more or less may tie up many of the loose ends of the Dark Age. We are also going to talk, quite frankly, even if shortly, about how this book may be the wrong approach to the subject in some small ways. So, let's talk about the Ghosts of Obeedah, and the implications within. First, I want to point out there will be some spoilers in here, so if you're not wanting to get them, change the video, just as a quick aside. So this is an RPG supplement with many canonical side components to it about the fate of the Word of Blake, after their most infamously named era. Many thought the Word of Blake dead, but there was always too many hints of them being alive, to really make that realistic in all honesty, without further explanation than what we got in the current array of sourcebooks, to be clear. Many of the more lore-centric portions of this book are really about explaining what's happened in their absence, to them. Because yes, this does confirm that the Word of Blake is not dead. It was not wiped out during the Blakist era, and large elements of it escaped annihilation. So, we learned in this book that they had two main assets survive the Blakist era. To start with, the Fleet and Shadow divisions appear to have taken flight first, leaving the Inner Sphere to go beyond to found some new homeland for themselves. There were remnants who stayed behind on at least 2 hidden worlds, which the book documents in beautiful detail, I should add. We also learn about most of the remaining hidden worlds, or ones which were destroyed before the Word took flight from the Inner Sphere. Detail is given as to why these worlds exist in the first place, which is superbly done. In fact, as you can probably guess, the book is named after one of those hidden worlds, Obeedah, which is one of the 2 main worlds of note. The book contains reasons why the Word of Blake aren't around, and why they're not really playable anymore. To give the best insight that I can, they're not playable, or won't be receiving any meaningful forces, mechs, or rules for the current era, not just because they were banished to the shadows after the Blakist era, but because, frankly, they left. The handbook introduces some Blakist elements for you to fight all the same, but they're not really Comstar or the Word of Blake. They're kind of posers. There are Neo-Blakists who worship the Word of Blake and try to mirror them, but they're really all chaff for the module, or at least that's how they appear to me. How many Neo-Blakists are running around in the setting right now? Honestly, I'm not really sure. But the Neo-Blakists, I should add, are nowhere near as dangerous as the Word of Blake, which is explicitly noted, or even sadly the now defunct Blessed Order of Comstar. They're just LARPers, basically. They exist, I suspect, mostly for the module, and they don't really matter. So yeah, the blackout happened, and the Word of Blake just books it because they think it's a sign of something. They're gone. The story about them leaving was extremely well crafted for the time it was given in book. And to be honest, the explanations provided were of quality. The parts of the RPG campaign explaining it are also superbly done. But they're just gone, man. Herb Bees is the main writer, and he's a former line developer. And while some of the direction and ideas he had weren't always the best, I cannot in any way downplay the attention that he put into this book. I think it's really well done personally. I've said that multiple times, so I do apologize, but I really want to stress that because there's a second half to this video. In fact, I will go so far as to say that I give a recommendation alone just on the depth of the lore inside. The RPG component of it I can't really judge, as despite owning A Time of War, I've not really had a chance to play it, sadly. You'll get about 1,000 times the detail I've provided here, which gives a great addition of texture and context to what I've talked about here. There are some things that I'm not going to spoil in this review. You're going to need to read it for yourselves to get everything. This even touches on things like the HPG blackout, for instance, and who is or is not responsible. Given that this PDF is literally $3, it is super worth your time. I think good pieces deserve good shoutouts, and I'm happy to give you this one, even if there is one issue I kinda want to touch on here, which is now the second part of the video. So, I am going to be openly critical here because of how few products have been released over the last few years, really since the Ilclan era started. And I'm just going to have to be frank. First of all, yes, the book ties up a ton of the Blakist era, and provides great insights, which is what makes it worthwhile. Answers to long-standing questions are good. Second, and more importantly, it's really kind of bait, whether it's intended to be or not. I get that it's probably not intentional, but it just consistently strings an entire fanbase along. Yeah, I said it. It's happened in several books now, and there just isn't really anything happening for either Comstar or its offshoot, The Word of Blake. There won't be any new Blakist mechs with Blakist configurations coming anytime soon, if ever, for new eras. There won't be a Blakist force. There won't be Blakist books in the new era, and to be clear, this is just an RPG supplement. It's a desert for you if you play the Comguards, Word of Blake, or Shadow Divisions. Some might argue that the teasing means that we'll get something. I've spoiled this before, and I'm going to spoil it again. No, nothing at this time will come of it. And there is very little that will change that anytime soon. I'm going to provide a quick rundown of the nothing burgers we've been delivered so far. So in total we've had Elements of Treason Opportunity, a solid book by Craig A. Reed, which will have no Comstar related follow-up. We've had Comstar excerpts from Recognition Guide Classics, which openly tries to say, well, what if they are really still out there? Again, there's no lists or units that are going to be actively supported. They're not going to be on the master unit list, in other words. Finally, now we've had the Ghosts of Obeedah, which is good, but I don't think we're going to be getting any Neo-Blakist factions to play, unfortunately, outside of this RPG. I'd also say that there was a section of Shrapnel issue 14, going over everyone picking at the bones of Comstar. I honestly rolled my eyes and didn't read through the rest of the issue after reading it. I'm not gonna lie, it just seems out in poor taste, personally, but that just is what it is. I honestly just hate baiting, and then I hate it when people have been baited and then they're just given something that puts things down even more. Because these things come out, and then consistent reminders seem to be put in place to remind you that the faction is dead, and without much of a good reason, to be frank. It just ends up being, we're not going to give you anything, but here are some rumors and whispers. What really does make this worse, for me especially, is knowing that these things are really just a tease. There's no payoff on the other side of them. But I have covered this before, but I think it's relevant for me to say this when reviewing this book, because I do feel, even though this book is worthwhile, that there is a degree, once more, of what we've seen with previous titles. It's great that this book was made. It answers some questions and does add to the world of Battletech, for both Dark Age and Ilclan, in a real way. There might be a follow-up to explain the last hidden world, as it wasn't displayed in this particular tome. There might not be as well by contrast, but it seems to at least set that up to some small degree. But sadly, you're not really going to get Comstar, the Blessed Order, or the Word of Blake. Some people will cheer this on, but honestly, I don't really understand at this point cheering on less people to play with in a wargame, personally. Especially when a popular faction has been made completely inert. I also want to quickly add here at the end, I still like CGL very much. I appreciate the work they do, I appreciate the products they produce. But I also have to be critical when I see something like this, which I think is bad for the player base, and I think it's bad for the property. All that being said, I still very much appreciated the book. Anyway, that's enough from me. Really, and I say this and I mean it with full endorsement, buy the book if you want some great lore explanations and expansion. It is genuinely good. I will have a link to it in the top pinned comment of this video. Do not judge yourself by the friends you have, but by the enemies you make. Thank you for joining me here today. Just a quick outro this time. If you enjoyed, remember to hit the like button. If you're new, remember to subscribe. More Battletech content is always in the works. Next up will be my review of the Merrick assault mech of the Dark Age, the Giuliano. I know I was pretty delighted going through a lot of the content of this book, but are you interested in the book? And what are your thoughts if you've already picked it up? I will catch you all in the comments section below. Either way,